Hey everyone, welcome. I'm TK. We're going to dig into Esther. Quick Bible study, 4-week session, just kind of looking at the book of Esther, seeing how it really affects us and what it's all about, and just knowing what's happening in this life of Esther and the Jewish people and Israel. And so we're going to dig into that. I love Esther. I love the story and what happens through it all. So let's dig in and find out what's going on. So with that, we're going to start right at the beginning, chapter 1, verse 1. Just kind of read through. We're going to read through verse 12. I got a question for us to wrestle with as we look at verse 12 in Esther here. So now in the days of Xerxes, the Xerxes who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days when King Xerxes sat on his royal throne in Susa the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for his officials and servants, the army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and the governors of the province before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days. 180 days. Imagine that, a 180-day party going on just for him to show off, look at what I got, right? And when those days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 more days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords from fine linen and purple to silver rods. The marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyra, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kind, and the royal wine was lavished according to the beauty of the king, and drinking was according to the edict. There is no compulsion, for the king has given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, in other words, he was drunk, right? He had way too much to drink. He commanded his eunuchs, Mahuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs in all. Everyone knows what a eunuch is, right? Yeah, the eunuch was the man who had his male parts cut off so that he couldn't do anything with the king's wives and harem, because he worked with the harem all the time. So he was all the women all the time. And so in order to protect them, the women, they got their male parts cut off. Not a job I wanted or would ask for, but there were 7 of them right there, right? And he asked those 7 eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. All right, we're going to stop right there. A couple questions here. How would you describe King Xerxes? Take a look at 4 and 10. Verses 4 and 10, right? While he showed off his riches, he was very proud of what he had, right? He wanted to show off his riches. Verse 10, when his heart was merry with wine. So apparently he liked to drink a lot, all right? So not only was he proud of what he had, he indulged in a lot of fun things to do, the earthly ways of doing it, right? Getting drunk, being merry, just having a really good time. No care in the world, just going after it, right? And then, excuse me, and then verse 12 happens, right? So let's take a look at verse 12. And then what's he do in verse 11? Just before that, he goes, hey, Queen Vashti, I'm going to bring you out. This tells you a little bit about King Xerxes as well, right? I'm going to bring you out. I'm going to parade you in front of everybody. That's right. I'm going to make everyone look at you because you are beautiful and you're mine, right? It's a possession thing for Xerxes here. And then the queen comes out. Or does she? Let's find out in verse 12. All right, verse 12, we pick it up. But Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged and his anger burned within him. So the king goes, all right, Vashti, come on out. And Vashti goes, no, you didn't, right? The Queen Vashti's like, I ain't going out there. He's drunk. All he wants to do is parade me. It ain't going to happen. I'm going to stay right here. And what happens to King Xerxes? Because of the wine, maybe because of his personality and who he was, his anger burned within him, right? And because of his anger, then he's going to do something. And this is the thing we got to think about. When we get upset and angry about something, what we can't do is make a decision based on that anger, because we're not going to make the right decisions. Anytime that anger comes in, it's not a good thing, right? So we need to calm down, think through things, and then make a decision. So that's not what Xerxes does here, does it? All right, let's take a look at that. All right, so let's take a look at it. I'm going to jump down. Verse 13, then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure towards all he had versed in the law and judgments, the men next to him being these 7 princes and all that, who saw the king's face and sat first in his kingdom. Verse 15, according to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she had not performed the command of King Xerxes delivered by the eunuchs. And then Memucan came into the presence of the king and the officials. Not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the people who are in all the provinces and the king Xerxes. For the queen's behavior will be known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought out to him, and she didn't come. This very day the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's behavior will say the same to all the king's officials, and there'll be contempt and wrath will be plenty. What's the problem here, all right? What's the problem? Women are going to think for themselves. We can't allow that. Can you imagine living in a culture like that? And there may be some people out there today that think that same thing. But no, in this culture, it wasn't good for women to step up against their husbands, against those that were in a leadership role, especially to the king. Now, if the queen can do it, then anybody can do it, right? And so that was not good. That's the perceived problem, and because of that, and I remember he's drunk. He's not, probably still not completely sober. He brings these people in. They're talking about that. They're all thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have chaos going on. It's not going to be good, right? And all of a sudden, they come up with a solution, right? They come up with a solution. All right, what's the solution? If it pleases the king, verse 19, if it pleases the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be repealed, that Vashti is never again to come before the king Xerxes, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So, what's going to happen? What's the solution? Queen Vashti, you out. You out. You said, no, you didn't to the king, and the king said, oh, no, you didn't, back, and said, you out, right? So they're making this decree. Vashti, you're gone. We're going to put someone else as the queen. Now, what's this going to do? It's going to send a message to all the women, right? You do that, there's a punishment to it. Here's the consequence to your disobedience. And so they're trying to set up this message, this law, this decree that's going to stop any kind of insubordination that just might happen. And so it goes on and does it. So when the decree was made by the kings, proclaimed throughout the kingdom, for it is vast, all the women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. This advice pleased the king and the princess, and the king did as they proposed. And letters were sent out, and everyone knows this is what's going on. Chapter 2. Now we pick up in chapter 2, right? Now, after all these things, when the anger of King Xerxes had abated, when it finally came down, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful women virgins be sought out for the king, and that the king appoint officers in all the provinces of the kingdom to gather all the beautiful women virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel, under custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given to them, and let the young women who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the king, and so he did. He starts off, when he finally comes to his senses and his anger from it, he goes, "What did I do? I just sent away Vashti. I loved her. I liked her." But yet, because of making choices, when you're angry and when you're not thinking correctly, that becomes a problem, right? And so now he has to live within a different type of situation because of those choices that he made. And so now here it comes another solution, right? Let's bring all the pretty girls in, all the virgins in, and then let's go ahead and allow him to choose who might be the next queen, right? So who's going to be the next queen? Now we pick up in verse 5. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jate, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. So he's from the tribe of Benjamin. Now, Benjamin goes all the way back to Jacob, and he had the 12 sons. Benjamin was the youngest, and so he comes from that tribe of Benjamin, made up the 12 tribes of Israel. So who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So now we find Mordecai entering into the story, right? So we have Mordecai entering into the story, and now we're introduced to Esther, who this book is written about. So we have Mordecai and Esther. All right. Going on, and Esther is Mordecai's cousin, so they're cousins, and he's raising her up to that. So Esther is beautiful to look at, right? So she's going to fit what the king's edict is to bring all the good-looking, pretty girls, virgins, into his harem to find the next queen. All right, let's jump down to verse 10 now. All right, verse 10. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. Now, why would she think you'd do that? Right? Now, as a Jew, she's been in exile, right? She was carried away. We read that a little bit earlier there in verse 6. Carried away. So Mordecai was carried away when King Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, the Babylonian captivity, and they pulled them all out. And so now they're away from their hometown. And so they're keeping their nationality kind of a secret, kind of to themselves, because there's going to be some repercussions if they let it known out. So she holds back who she is. All right, so in verse 14, there's going to be a criteria for people who are going to be able to enter into the king. Now she's in the harem. She's been chosen to be in that harem, right? And then verse 14 is going to tell you what's going to happen then if you're called in to be part of and to see the king. So in the evening, she would go in, and in the morning, she would return to the second harem in custody of Shazaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. When in turn When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as her own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except that Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her, and when Esther was taken to the king Xerxes into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. All right? So, now Esther's turn to come in that 10th month. She's actually been there for about a year now. So when we count the months beginning, so she's been there about 12 months of receiving beauty treatments, facials and pedicures and manicures and getting massages and just having a very nice spa year, right? The whole year in a spa. Now that sounds pretty good right now. Sounds really good, right? To have that spa treatment. So she's receiving this and receiving this. She goes into the king. He wins favor. She becomes the next queen. And it's good, right? Now we jump up to verse 21. Jumping over to verse 21, right? Now she's kept her nationality a secret. She's kept it that she's a Jewish descendant to herself still. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, so what happened? Mordecai now is like, okay, Esther's in there. I'm going to sit by the king's gate just in case Esther needs me, and I'm going to be there for her because I promise I'm going to raise this girl. I love this girl as if she's my child. In those days, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now, Big Thumb and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Xerxes. So apparently there's some insurgents going on here, right? So there's a couple people, a couple of the eunuchs not liking King Xerxes, and so now they've got this plot to lay hands, or what that means, they want to kill King Xerxes. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king. And so Mordecai tells Esther, who then goes and tells the people this is what's going to happen so that it can get news to the king. They find out, they investigate it, they find out it's so, and boom, right? Those two then are hung on the gallows. Now, the gallows. It's kind of think of a big long pole. Sometimes you think of the gallows with our hands up there and our head through there. Right now, this is a big long pole that had a little stick sticking out, and a person would be sat upon that, not sat upon that, sat upon that. So it would actually go into their bottom area, as if they were like right up there. Right up there, right? And then kind of tied up there, and they would be hung up there on these gallows until they died. And they were in display of this is what happens to the people who do wrong. And so these two eunuchs are now being hung on the gallows and being displayed. This is what happens when you plot against the king. All right. So some application questions. We're going to stop there in the Bible study, but some things to think about for you to maybe write out or what have you. And I'm going to put the questions up as well as I asked them. What's the normal way to deal with someone or who said something or did something that hurt you? How do you normally handle that? Do you ignore it and walk away? Are you passive about it? Are you aggressive? Are you passive aggressive? How do you normally handle when something bad happens to you? Do you turn to maybe something that's not beneficial for you? King Xerxes went to alcohol, right? He drank and drank, and then he did it, and then he got angry, and then he had all those negative things that were in his life. What's in your life that you turn to when you do get angry, when something doesn't quite go your way? The question is, how do you think God wants us to deal with people who wrong us? What are your thoughts on that? How does God want us to deal? Where does forgiveness fit into when someone wrongs us? How quick is forgiveness? How quick does depend? I'm assuming it depends on what happens and what people do, and how quickly you would then forgive. And it doesn't say you might not forget it. You know, we want to remember so we don't get hurt again. That's not what forgiveness means. But how does God want us to deal with people? I mean, think of King Xerxes. What do you do? Kick Vashti out, right? I mean, completely without even knowing the whole story, what was going on. Sometimes we react that way as well. But how does God want us to do that? And guys, for you, if you were a king, how would you feel having all that power? The king. I mean, you said something and it happened, right? You were the king. Your word was it. The law. Boom. You say it, it's going to happen. How do you feel about that power? Is that power good? How would you use that power for good and not for some selfish ambitions? And girls, how would you feel if you were like Esther and you were part of that harem and you were receiving that treatment, knowing that you're going to be displayed before the king, and if the king chose you, you're queen. And think of the power that would have to be the queen, second right there with the king. Would you want to be the queen? What would you do with the power if you were the queen? What would you do in the influence of the harem if you were a part of that? How would you feel? What are some emotions and ideas that come up with that one? Now, if you heard something or you saw something that could potentially hurt someone else physically or emotionally, what would you do with that information? What would you do if you heard someone talking about someone else and you knew it was going to be bad for them? Would you do something about it? What if a friend of yours was talking and all of a sudden it was like revenge was going to happen? Would you try to stop it? Would you agree with it? Would you encourage it? A lot of times we take it on ourselves and we find people around us who agree with us, and next thing you know, it's not just me, it's everyone else, and now my anger gets bigger. But what would you do if you found out? Would you do something different, and how would you share that information, and how would you use that information for good, right? To do something better, to help our world and help people out. So that's Esther chapter 1 and 2, and we're going to pick up the next chapters here in the next session with that. So Esther's an awesome book. Go ahead and read through the whole thing if you want to. It's a great story, but we'll just kind of pick it apart and go through that. So with that, hope you have a great day. God's blessings to you all. Remember that God's always active. The great thing about this book right here, it never mentions God throughout the whole book, but we know God is actively part of our lives. He's active a part of your life right now. He's with you. His power is with you. His love is with you. His grace is with you. So keep your head up and keep moving forward. Keep your eyes focused on Him. Love our Lord, the heart, mind, soul, body, spirit, everything who we are, everything. Is focused on Him. We give it to Him. So we thank Him for being a part of that. With that, I hope to see you guys next time, and take care. God's blessings.